Do you like stories of humble beginnings and lives of men or women who rose to great heights and lives they could have never imagined? I know I do. I'm Benjamin Angwin, and this is one such story. Let's jump in. James J. Davis's life is a great story of contrasts. An immigrant from a working-class Welsh background who rose to one of the highest public offices in the United States of America as a champion of both major labor reforms and firm limits on immigration. Born James John Davies in Tredegar in 1873, here in Wales, he was a poor boy from the Cymoedd. At the age of 7, he could never have imagined where his life would take him. He came to the United States at the tender age of 8 in 1881. By the age of 10, with his family needing help, he worked as a puddler's assistant in the fiery steel mills of Pennsylvania. That is a hard job for a child. We're talking about stirring molten pots of iron, tending to the furnace fire, and pounding red-hot iron with a steam hammer. I'm putting an image of a steam hammer on the screen just to show you how big these things were. And can you imagine being a kid as that steamed hammer came racing down? It must have been an explosion of sparks. This was a tough job for a kid to do. From this he earned the endearing nickname, Puddler Jim, which formed his later career in his understanding of the American industrial working class. Davis's Welsh heritage was not just a birthplace, it was a foundation and an ethical institution and framework. His autobiography, The Iron Puddler, written in 1922, shows us a vivid, first-hand telling of this road from a child laborer in a steel mill to a national public figure. In the book, Davis details the harshness of the 12-hour workday that was common in the steel industry in the early 20th century, a system he staunchly opposed. This core part of his values served not only as a memoir to him, but also as a powerful tool to humanize the plight of the industrial worker. He tells of the experience of the Welsh, who were not typically an uprooted people, but brought with them set skills in mining and ironwork, allowing Welsh to integrate into American society smoothly, smoother than most. And this value of integrating into the culture, this background instilled in him a strong belief in the dignity of work and the importance of a stable, safe life for working families, a theme that would run through his social and political career and shape his later views on what made a good American citizen. Soon, he showed he was able to move up the ranks. He became a miner briefly, a very Welsh thing to do, before he moved to the next state over, Indiana, in 1893, where he was elected to be city clerk of Elmwood, Indiana, in 1898. He gained another promotion to recorder in Madison, Indiana, before returning to Pennsylvania in 1906, where his real-life work began, almost at once. During his period in Indiana and not after, he signed his name Davies, not Davis, which is odd, as his name was Davis. Was he trying to remind himself of higher ambitions somehow, or experimenting with his identity, his Americanization, perhaps? Davis's commitment to social welfare was most clearly shown through his leadership in the Loyal Order of the Moose, a fraternal organization he joined in 1906. By 1907, he was regional organizer for the Loyal Order of the Moose. He rose fast through the ranks of this society and was made its Director General in 1909. He had a knack for gaining elected and appointed positions to advance himself. Well, I guess he was a politician by nature. Just a note on this, I have learned on the struggles and advances in my own life, which Mr. Davis learned earlier than I did, clearly. Humans are a tribal species, not collectivist and not individualist. You don't need credentials. You need a tribe that values what you have to give them, and you need to serve them to get anything in return. A community, not a collective in which you sell your soul away, but something in which you contribute while holding a bit of yourself and your own interests. It's easy. In 1918, he led the home front of the war effort by providing aid to veterans during and after World War I, which won him friends in high places. James J. Davis transformed the struggling order into a mighty mutual aid society. If you scratch my back, I will scratch yours. And your children will not have to work at the steel mill, at least until they're adults, right? We got you covered, if you got us covered. He was the driving force behind the creation of Moose Art, which he founded in 1909. This was a child city and school in Illinois for the children of dead and disabled Moose members, and he also set up Moose Haven, a community for the Order's elderly members in Florida. From Canada to the Bahamas, he set up lodges. And later in 1926, he would found the Grand Lodge of Britain in his hometown of Tredegar in Wales. This shows the length he went to serve his fellow man. But not just that, all these years later, he was still Welsh. These initiatives were a big deal in an era before major government social safety nets. The vision Davis had for the Muse was as a guardian of working class families, using the organization's strength to safeguard, provide, and care for its own people. This was a practical, realist approach to community support. This ground-up activism and local responsibility is quite Welsh, actually, and fits well within America also. It's kind of interesting that there is a can-do-it attitude in Wales, but it has to be tied to a very local community. And if you can figure out how to transport that into American culture, it works really well. It is within the context of working for his fellow man, his successful assimilation into American culture, and his work with the Moose, that Davis's anti-immigration efforts must be seen. As I noted, he had a canny knack for gaining appointed positions. His first big win after Director General was an appointed office, not an elected office, nor one where a job interview was needed. Not long after his work with war veterans, President Warren G. Harding appointed Mr. Davis Secretary of Labor in 1921, a rank he would hold all the way to 1930. That's quite a stretch for that level of position. Under 3 presidents, Harding, Coolidge, and Hoover, he was responsible for the Bureau of Immigration and established the Border Patrol. Davis was a staunch advocate for restrictive immigration policies, warmly backing measures like the Emergency Quota Act of 1921 and the more Permanent Immigration Act of 1924, the Johnson-Reed Act. His 1921 book, Immigration Laws, provides detailed insight into his views. In it, he called for a homogeneous race and expressed some support for the eugenics movement, lamenting the influx of cheap labor from Southern and Eastern Europe. His advocacy was framed not in terms of modern concepts of racism, but rather as he saw it through the lens of keeping American social unity and heritage. In the post-World War I era, there was widespread fear of radicalism and an anxiety about nations being able to assimilate a mass influx of new arrivals. I see that as a valid view, irregardless of what you think on other things. I see maintaining your culture as valid, though I don't agree with the idea of a homogeneous race. Davis's views valued national cohesion above all. He believed the strength of the United States lay in a unified citizenry sharing common values and a relatively homogeneous cultural background, much like the successful Welsh community he had known. He felt strongly that Americans had learned to discern between bad stock and good stock, weak blood and strong blood, sound heredity and sickly human stuff. Whoa, let's jump out and talk about that. I have to jump in here and note that the time of his death and the consensus which was taking shape. This guy died in 1947 at the beginning of this strange post-war consensus that we're coming out of now, finally, in which nationalism and ethnic identity was seen as some kind of moral sin worse than adultery or theft. And because he died right at the beginning of that, how he's been viewed has been skewed to reflect that moral consensus, which wasn't really prevalent in his lifetime. Mr. Davis was stating a truth that we in our time are struggling to get across now as we fight against this anti-nationalist consensus about what nations even are. That nations are not just ideas. They're not a set of values or a constitution. Nations are a people, and he understood that. This period, 1945 to 1950, was the beginning of a world which saw nationalism and having an ethnic identity as bad, lasting all the way to about Corona in 2020 and stretching almost to 2025, in which we have seen the pro-globalization consensus and radical liberalism begin to break down, without quite being defeated yet, but it is breaking finally. So James J. Davis was stating basic truth that America does have a foundational heritage. We're not just a constitution, and if we let everyone in, America will be lost. Did Mr. Davis go too far by going into eugenics? Absolutely. I don't support that at all, but that doesn't refute everything else that he said. Was he right that cultures are on a spectrum, from closer to you than farther away from you, and then if you invite in cultures and peoples and faiths that are really distant from you, that it will damage your culture socially, politically, and economically? Absolutely. And damage the safety of your people. He understood that. Was he trying to prevent violence in the lives of his great-grandchildren by preventing the dissolving of social cohesion in his own communities? Absolutely. He was right on that. By restricting migration from lands which do not match the original foundation and heritage of the United States. Did he go a bit too far sometimes? Yes. Was he trying to be unfair or prejudiced? No. He was trying to be just and protect the peoples who propelled him from being a boy working in a furnace, basically, up to the echelons of power in the highest offices of the United States. He cared about the people that did that for him, who allowed him to reach stations beyond his wildest dreams. He wanted to serve them and give back in return. Are his views on migration controversial today? Yes, but not nearly as much as 10 years ago. The Overton window is shifting, and this anti-nationalist liberal framework that we've been forced to live under is shattering. And I hope his legacy will be viewed in the context that it was shaped by what came immediately after him. And his views in his own time were very much mainstream and normal. That does not mean I support him on eugenics. I don't. You can disagree with someone on a big issue like that, but agree with him on almost everything else, which I think I pretty much do. Central to his logic was the issue of social and economic strain. Davis firmly believed that uncontrolled immigration created a surplus of labor, allowing industrialists to depress wages and weaken unions. That just seems like common sense to me. He saw an endless stream of newcomers as creating social burdens, including more poverty and crime, straining urban infrastructure and social services. The policies he championed, such as the 1924 Act, which set quotas based on the 1890 census to heavily favor Northern and Western European countries, were designed to protect local wage standards by preventing contractors from basing their bids on wages lower than those prevailing in the area. Meaning basically some guy from Italy could not take your job for half the money, and you were able to feed your family. In James J. Davis's view, he was promoting national cohesion, ensuring that new arrivals could be properly Americanized and preventing the social and economic strain he rightly believed uncontrolled immigration causes. Beyond immigration and the moose, Davis left a lasting legislative mark as a U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania for 15 years, 1930 to 1945. After his stretch as Secretary of Labor, he co-sponsored the landmark Davis-Bacon Act of 1931, requiring that contractors on federal public work projects pay their workers the local prevailing wage, often the union wage, which would help the working class across America truly get back on its feet under Franklin D. Roosevelt. The act, which applies to federally funded contracts over $2,000 for public buildings or works, was designed to protect local wage standards for construction workers. Those guys you see in old photographs building the skyscrapers of New York, those are the guys he was protecting. This law further cemented his reputation as a conservative hero of labor who believed in fair pay and strong working standards, continuing his legacy of advocating for the well-being of the working man. In my opinion, James J. Davis's career is a complex tale of an immigrant's success, a dedicated social reformer who built whole communities, and a politician whose nativist patriotism, though controversial, shaped the immigration of his era and consequent arguments later, with a vision of a unified America, unified communities, an American society through which the culture of the post-war era came to be seen as shameful, wrongly so, and in that light lost the actual meaning of what he was trying to say, that a nation is not an idea, a nation is a people, and you have to care for your own people in order to help others. And his actions, from building Mooseheart, the child city, to defending American workers on both pay and being outcompeted by foreign workers, it all stemmed from his vision of a cohesive, unified society, a unified nation, where if you work hard, you get a fair deal. And that's where we leave it for tonight.